You're listening to the NVus Alien Podcast with your host, Heather Woodward, an award-winning psychic, supernatural author, and lover of all things true crime. On this show, we're going to deep dive into topics that don't usually see the light of day. The spooky, the weird, the macabre, the paranormal, and of course, aliens. Sit back, grab a cup of tea, and let's get on with the show.
You want answers, not motivational quotes pretending to be guidance. You want the truth that changes things. That's where I come in. I read energy like a detective. Your patterns, your blocks, the turning points you feel coming but can't name yet. I translate what the universe has already lined up for you. I'm Heather, psychic, coach, witch. 25 years of helping people stop the self-sabotage and step into their power. If you're ready to move, text me 25224194447. Real guidance, real clarity. Zero games. That's me, 25224194447. Let's pull the cards and see what happens next. Now put your tinfoil hat on. Curiosity engaged. Let's get into the podcast.
Tell me a little bit about yourselves and how you got into this field.
It's been with me all my life, so I never got into it. It found me. I think it finds people. But writing about it and doing movies about it started about, for me anyhow, I would say about 12 years ago. Mark, what's your story?
I got started with you directly. Like a lot of people, there are experiences in my life growing up that are difficult, if not impossible, to answer. And Ron and I met practicing a martial art called Aikido, and then later I went to work for Ron with Center Communications, doing educational videos and documentaries. So when Ron approached me about doing a follow-up book to his Bigfoot Alien Connection movie, I agreed right away. I agreed as a skeptic and historian. And then over the years, as we've done more work, and I've worked on more, not only nonfiction books with him, but also writing novels, I've learned that my skepticism could very well silo me and not allow me to understand those experiences I had when I was younger. I owe a great debt of gratitude to Ron to helping me out of that silo and to be a part of his paranormal investigation.
I'm looking up the movie. I've seen it. It's on Amazon.
Bigfoot Alien Connection Revealed, is that what you're talking about? Yeah, that movie has been one of the most successful documentaries in this area. It was pre-COVID, and it's reached over 10 million people on different streaming platforms. It's been a transformational movie for many people. It's embarrassing how many people have seen it. I'll tell you a little story about it. I was at Whole Foods and I was returning something, and I got a t-shirt from somebody of a Bigfoot and a UFO, and the guy noticed it and he looked at it and he said, "Oh, I just seen this great movie." And it was the Bigfoot Alien Connection Revealed. And then he looked at me and said, with great disappointment, I don't know what he thought, but I wasn't going to look like an old man like me.
That's totally funny. I wanted to ask you about your approach because I watched the trailer and it was for the movie and the book, but you did like almost like a CE5 technique where you did meditations.
We did indeed. Brilliantly, I called it the CE6 protocol. Mark thought that was a good idea.
Yeah, absolutely.
Close Encounters of the Sixth Kind, because we're inviting contact in a rather unique way in terms of hypotheses that comes from Jacques Vallée. Do you know who he is?
I do, in fact, yes.
So he has this hypothesis that there's an ancient alien presence that's driving us forward by keeping the mystery alive. And that pretty much, and Mark as the historian was able to track many different examples like art, music, technology, scientific paradigms to see how they progressed over time since the beginning of language. And it pretty much follows the same pattern. As soon as people get into a particular worldview and it gets pretty established, something comes along and disrupts it, and they ask more questions and something new happens. And I think the classic example is that people were thought that disease was caused by witches and curses and, oh, I don't know, any old thing, they chills in the air. But then when microscopes were invented, it became clear that there were actually microbes that had a lot to do with a lot of the diseases people have. And as a result, that triggered new technology to look more closely at them and study them and see what they were made of. And pretty much every line of development among human beings follows that same pattern.
One of the things that Jacques Vallée posits with his control system hypothesis is this idea of as Ron mentioned, a presence which enters our lives and shows us mysteries. And I'm fond of saying that humans are as curious as cats, and we get in just about as much trouble. Unfortunately, we don't have 9 lives. At any rate, our curiosity leads us to want to find out more about what's going on. And Ron's example of the microscope, which was invented by a Dutch scholar, I believe his name is Van Leeuwenhoek, because he wanted to see things that were small. He was maybe he was the world's first reductionist. He really wanted to see things as small as they could get. So this microscope shows him things as small as they can get, but it doesn't answer his questions. It only leads to more questions. And then you have Robert Hooke a couple of generations later, and he sees cells, and he says, oh, so these are some of the smallest things in the human body, these tiny cells. But they don't answer all the questions for him. They just pose more questions for him to explore. And if you go with that scientific revolution of 500 years ago to the present, we have, as a species, humans have pursued question after question, and it's led us to incredible technologies, the latest of which in the 21st century is our large language models, what we commonly refer to as AI. And the AI revolution is just leading us again to more questions about what can AI do? Is AI good, for example? Is AI something that can't be controlled? Should we be cautious around it? That's in a nutshell what Jacques Vallée talks about, and what the book, The High Strangeness of Bigfoot, pursues, Bigfoot being a metaphor for that control system hypothesis of Jacques Vallée.
That's very interesting. So I have a theory about the paranormal in general that just goes along with that a little bit, which is that the more you interact with the phenomenon, the more you become the phenomenon, the more that and it's almost like the trickster aspect of it, where the more you interact with it, the farther out it becomes. Like you can never quite get your hands on it. Does that make sense?
That's what it does.
Yep.
And the more you interact with it, it starts to shadow you a lot, or it starts to mimic you or your shadow side. And so there's always this idea of anytime you venture into something like where you're doing High Strangeness and Bigfoot, you become part of the initiation.
Yes, I think there's 2 ways to look at it from the presence. It can manifest or masquerade as a Bigfoot in a multiplicity of ways, or as crafts or UAPs. That shows you they defy typical physics, gravity theories, and so on. They move so fast. And it can also interact at, let's say, the mind level, which could be in terms of archetypes that occur both in the field of all consciousness beings and ones that occur more particularly of individuals. And the trickster is definitely one of those archetypes. It's something that kind of creates chaos and bridges the gap between this world and the other world, the other side, the non-physical. So yeah, I think that's one way of stating how this thing works. It creates more mystery. And I think, I forget who said this, but when you start studying these things, it starts studying you. So one of the experiences I had is that it said my name and it came from nowhere. And everybody else in the group heard it. So it knows who I am and what I'm doing, knows I'm talking to you. Probably this is all part of its plan.
Yeah, I often wonder, that's a really good, what you just said, that point is really good. I often wonder if it's watching us as much as we're watching it, or in your opinion, do you think that Bigfoot is transdimensional?
I think that's these terms to try and explain it aren't going to do the job. Interdimensional, that kind of thing just isn't going to do it. But it might lead you to ask better questions, because I don't think that explains anything. If we said yes, it is, then so what? I just don't think that helps move the ball forward particularly. I was trying to think of the collective consciousness before, and now it just came to me. So you were asking earlier about how we came to this, and I was a child of the 60s in a way, in the New Age movement, and I was fascinated with the Eastern religions. And as a filmmaker, I could explore them because I have a lot of cachet as a filmmaker, not personally, but as the media itself. And I could investigate Buddhism and Hinduism and follow leaders in them to see what they were about. And that was my path for a long time. Meditation. I did these things called enlightenment intensives, where you ask deeply about who am I, what is life. And I had mystical experiences doing that, like the void. But I was never really it was not totally satisfying to go down those paths. And eventually, for some reason, I was given the task by a company to do a series called Chasing Bigfoot. And it opened up the idea that there's another realm, or let's say silo, and that was the realm or silo of experiencers, people who see ghosts, see Bigfoot, see UAPs, and so on. But they really didn't connect with the mystical path that I started out on. And that was kind of what I was trying to bridge in the Bigfoot Alien Connection Revealed. And I've continued down that path. Anyhow, one of the things that came about doing this enlightenment intensive is my teacher said there's this chant, and it's based on the vowels that form all natural languages, and going back to when humans started to get language. And of course, we're the only thing that distinguishes us really from all other creatures on this planet and plants is we have language. They communicate, but no language. And he said that this chant is basically the vowels if you're familiar with a chakra.
Yes.
So it starts down below, and as you say these vowels, they're A, E, I, O, U, and as you move up, you get to the eye chakra, the head chakra. And he said to me, if you do this really fast and you're doing some exercise at the same time, something unique might happen. So I was on my Nordic track, and as I was doing this, the self, the me, Ron, the you, Heather, the Mark thing just disappeared. And there just was, everything was perfect. Now I know that's the state people get into when they're in the flow state. And the interesting thing for me was when I was done, I sat down on the couch and I could see the self being rebuilt again. And then I was just stupid Ron again with all my problems and crap. But when I was in Oklahoma like 3 years ago, it occurred to me we were using ghost hunting equipment to use the chant just for the heck of it with the group we were with, and crazy things happened that were really cool. So that that's the basis. That procedure became the basis of the CE6 protocol. Long-winded answer. Sorry.
I love long-winded answers. I love to know the process of how you're coming about this stuff because it is so interesting. You could just tell me that Bigfoot is an alien, and I'll be like, okay, but I want to know your process as to why. Where do we come up with this? Not that I don't believe you, because I absolutely do, but I want to know why.
Heather, I think this is a good point where we can try to connect the dots. What you were talking about, whether Bigfoot is transdimensional, and Ron's point that trying to define it doesn't really help. And I think if we understand it historically, and I'll be as brief as I can, I think that we'll have a better understanding of what Ron is saying when he says trying to define how Bigfoot appears and doesn't appear. It actually doesn't help the process of understanding why presence and mystery are so important. So if we go back to, say, Moses and the burning bush, So we could say that the burning bush is a manifestation of the presence trying to let Moses know that there are some really important things he needs to do. And 2,500 years ago, a lot of people had visions like this, but they took in the worldview of the time. And by that, I mean, in 2,500 years ago, there weren't cell phones, there weren't cameras, there were sheep herders, and we were just entering the Iron Age. Bronze was huge at the time. We're just starting to enter the Iron Age. The worldview would be much less sophisticated, much less complex than our 21st century view. And we're talking about an era of time when there were multiple deities, multiple gods. And even the First Testament actually starts out not with a single God. It talks about you will have no other gods before me, meaning that there are other gods there. So let's go 1,000 years into the future. Another example I like to use is St. Francis of Assisi. The Catholic Church is huge all through the Middle East, Europe, and Scandinavia. And Francis of Assisi is a very wealthy man, and he's accosted by a beggar on the road. And he later thinks that this beggar is an angel or perhaps Jesus Christ. So instead of appearing to him as a burning bush, which would have been the worldview of someone like Moses having that kind of a vision, it's more in line with the Catholic Church's idea of angels, demons, Christ figures appearing. So now let's fast forward again another 500 years to 1967, and we have the Patterson-Gimlin film, which is showing Bigfoot as this hairy creature. And I think this is important to note that if we compare the technology of 1967 to the technology of 2026, it's like rocks versus planes. It's sophisticated, yes, it's very good technology, but nothing like what we have today. So the worldview of that time is going to be exploring the existence of a presence with what the worldview is looking at, a flesh and blood creature. So of course, in the 1960s, Bigfoot has got to be a flesh and blood creature. In fact, the Salish Indian word talks about a wild spirit in the forest, and that harkens back to the Campbell architect of the wild man and the Carl Jung idea of the wild man.
Wild woman.
And the wild woman, yes. And so now we'll go a little bit more incrementally. By the start of the 21st century, technology has really improved, and people are beginning to say, well, with all these cameras around and cell phones, with the people carrying cameras and everything, how come nobody's ever filmed a Bigfoot? And by 2012, you've got cell phones with cameras in them, and now everybody's saying, what the heck? Why can't we film a Bigfoot? Why isn't there any physical evidence anywhere? How come somebody hasn't bagged one and has it hanging on his wall in his den somewhere? So we have to explain that. And how do we explain it? It's transdimensional, or it's interdimensional, or it's using portals. Einstein-Rosen bridges talk about magnetic portals that would allow the passage of material from one place to another. But all of these explanations are missing the point that Ron brought up. They are explanations trying to reduce the mystery presence to something that we can say, aha, this is what it is. This is a transdimensional being. It's appearing in front of me right now. I think what Ron was getting at, and this doesn't mean that your question is about transdimensions is wrong or interdimensions is wrong. What Ron's getting at is that the presence chooses the means it needs to connect to humans. As you were talking about earlier, Heather, when you talked like the more you believe in the paranormal, the more you become, I'm paraphrasing your words, become the paranormal. This is the same thing. The presence is choosing the means, the worldview of the time to connect to humans to help the mystery move forward.
Okay, so I love that. And it speaks to something else that I've been tracking. And this is partly why I asked for this interview. It's because I know a lot of Bigfoot people that swear it's flesh and blood, but then I know a lot of Bigfoot people who, as soon as they started moving into Bigfoot and searching for Bigfoot, they started to have more paranormal experiences. And then they said, yeah, this has never been about Bigfoot. It's been more about the mystery, as you say. And in that, I have been tracking this shadow figure. And I asked a lot of Bigfoot people, have you seen this shadow figure? Is this something that's Bigfoot related? And nobody knows. But the more that I try to track this thing down, or the more that I try to quantify it or identify it, when it speaks to exactly what you say, the more it becomes, why are you trying to identify it? Why not just experience it?
So is the shadow figure something you experience or just interested in because people have talked about it or described it?
Oh no, I've seen it. I've seen it more than once. It's always in the woods. And so it's this large, tall thing. It has no features, but it does watch. And sometimes it can be a little predatory, as in I don't feel like it's going to do anything to me per se. But it does act predatory in that if I can track it, it'll move forward about 6 feet and always stay to one side so that it can circle. And I'm like, that's interesting. That's why I started asking Bigfoot people about it, because I was like, that kind of feels like Bigfoot a little bit. But
Let me ask you couple more questions.
sure.
Does it have a human shape?
Yes.
Does it have any color?
No, it's usually black. It's
So let me ask you a question, Heather. What is when you see this shadow the figure, that when you experience it, what is your initial reaction? And then after a few seconds, what is your secondary reaction?
curiosity and then more curiosity. I'm never afraid of it. I wasn't even sure why I was seeing it. And strangely enough, I'm actually doing a documentary right now. And I was going through some footage from about 5 years ago. And I realized that why is everywhere I go, I'm seeing this thing and I'm not mentioning it. Like I have footage of it. I've seen it. I'm experiencing it, but I'm not saying anything about it. And then I was sent a copy of a film I did 17 years ago, and I was laughing about it. And that shadow presence is actually in that documentary too. And I'm like, wait a minute, what's going on here?
Wow.
Yeah. And so I have 20 plus years of footage of it that I didn't realize that I had. So I am so curious about your work, because the CE6 aspect of it and just the meditation aspect of it, and what are you experiencing, and is it adjacent?
A while ago, there's this place in Bailey, Colorado, where there's a prayer tree or sacred tree that the Ute Indians. You know anything about that?
I know of it. I don't know a lot about it.
So they were modified by the Ute Indians, and people would come and get medicine from them. And it's on a property of a resort. And I was doing a lot of interesting synchronicities. It was pointed out to me by somebody. My son-in-law puts on the Bigfoot weekend in Bailey, Colorado. People come out there. And so I had this idea that if people went over there and put their hand on the tree, something might happen for them spiritually or, or anything. If people did, everybody would come away with something. And so when Alan, again, my son-in-law, when everybody else, I said, let's you and I do this. And so we went and put our hands on it. I had my eyes closed and I opened up my eyes, and there behind him would be something that would probably correspond to a shadow figure. I call it a Bigfoot because it was big, but it had no real defining qualities to it. It was right behind Alan, but it was in the shape of a human. It had a slightly orangish tinge to it. And eventually I said to Alan, there's a creature behind you. And he said, oh yeah, I feel he's more sensitive. I felt it walk up behind me. I can sense it right now. And he was kind of waffling in and out of existence, kind of like in the Predator movie or Star Trek when they go in the transporter. So I think that's very close to what you were talking about, by the way.
Yeah, there's so funny you mentioned trees. Part of this was what the documentary is supposed to be about, is these rituals we are doing in the forest to connect to the spirit of the place. And it's strange that you say trees because part of the rituals were holding onto trees and pushing energy down into the grid underneath or the ley lines underneath to, center and to bring kind of harmony to the area because a lot of them are wounded areas. And strangely enough, when I noticed the thing is when we pushed the energy down into the earth through the trees and it showed up.
So it's similar, isn't it?
Very similar. Yeah. So you saw it as an orange
Yeah, slightly
reflective.
oranges tinge to it, but it had the shape of a human, but there was no detail. Let's put it that way. But it had a head and all that kind of thing.
Yeah. And what did you feel from it?
Did I feel anything?
Yeah.
First of all, I'm trying to make sense of it. What is that? And as I said, at the same time, Alan was doing this kind of waffling thing. So it was a dual situation. I wasn't scared. I was saying to myself, is that a Bigfoot? Trying to make sense of it. And then when I notified Alan, then I listened to him, and then the event was done. It was just done. I don't recall right now sitting here how it ended, but eventually Alan was back to just being a normal human being, not waffling in and out of whatever. I don't remember any distinct feelings, to tell you the truth, besides, what the heck is this? Is it a Bigfoot? Yeah.
Yeah, maybe.
So it was a mystery. Gave me a
Right.
mystery. There you go. Now I know the language. They wanted me to talk to you sometime and say I had this mystery similar to yours.
So I've
But
got a question for the two of you. I'm sorry, Heather. I know this is your show, but this is really fascinating to listen to. Ron and I had an experience in Sequoia National Park where we put our arms around one of the giant sequoias and we literally could feel the energy of the earth. And I don't want to try to describe so much what that is as other than like a heart beating. So what you both of you are talking about here, whether it's this shadow figure or a Bigfoot, what if we're, and both of you made a mention of trying to make sense of it. And this is my question to you. What if the purpose isn't to try to make sense of it? What if the purpose is to feel that energy because it is changing us in specific ways?
so I always go with initiations because of the three phases of the initiation. The book, I forget what it's called, but it's a book about initiation. And I always see those as transformative states where you move into the liminal, which means you're moving into some sort of initiation where you are forced to change. And either you accept it and you move through the transformation, or you choose not to and you learn the lesson again. And that's what I'm hearing you say. Is that correct?
Yeah, yeah. I think when we're trying to as reductionists, we're trying to figure out what's making it tick. And that's not the lesson. At least that's my question to you.
So let me just add one thing so when people have these extraordinary experiences, near-death experiences, mystical experiences, what goes offline is language. And when you're trying to make sense of it, at least what I am, is a kind of thought process. And when things really happen amazingly is when I'm not doing that. I'm not trying to make sense of it. Language is not playing a role momentarily, or maybe for quite a while. And that's when the look into the other side or the source or the non-physical world, there's many words for that. I mean, and that what that is for human beings has been follows the same track as religions, is the mystical experience, which I think is what you're talking about, is in a broad sense.
Mhm.
Yes. I found the book. It's called Archetypes of Initiation by Robert Moore. But yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, the more you look into it, the more you have to look at yourself because there is this aspect to it.
The core phenomena or event in the book is what happened at Church Creek in Colorado when I brought a bunch of people and did my first big experiment with the CE6 protocol. And I'll just run through the ways Bigfoot showed up. Can I do that?
Sure, that's great. That's perfect.
So when I had people focus on their body sensation, it showed up in everybody like waves of energy going through their body in different ways. felt presence of some energetic source. We had a diversity of people, including two psychics that experience Bigfoot all the time in their sensory energy way. And they have a group called Peoples of the Forest, and it's all about the trees and Bigfoot. And they felt it most profoundly, but even the tech guy I brought along who did none of this stuff, he felt it as well. It showed up as primitive music, a rhythmic beat of a drum, but like where in the heck's that coming from? Which music is probably the foundation, the autoregressive nature of music, how one note has to follow the other pretty much. That showed up. We had multiple examples of what of Ron Moorhead samurai speak or whatever you want to call it. Bigfoot chatter, again pointing to proto language. At one point, it actually came back to us with an AIOU, which we recorded. It showed up as subsonic pulses, which affect people's physiology. It showed up on the SLS camera. This is these figures, two of them interacting down by the creek. It showed up once just as we were departing. It always leaves, as Jacques Vallée says, just when you think you're done, you're not really done. When this one guy who did something really unusual, he grabbed our REM pod and went down to the creek and started interacting with it as you move. It's a little signal that's put up, that radio signal, something enters it, it goes off. So you could say, you can interact with, if you believe this, if this is true, you're a Bigfoot, step into the thing and it'll go off, and step away now, please. You can interact with it that way. But what was most important from my perspective is that it was pointing to pay attention to language. It showed us the stages of language, proto-language, music that, first of all, the rhythm of the beat that precedes language, because we're moving into this new stage of another form of language, the autoregressive nature of the LLMs. So it showed up in all those ways, and that was very encouraging, of course, and we were able to record all these things. It also showed up as a stench that turns sweet and then goes back to stenchy. And when we did it in Sedona just a little over a week ago with 200 people in a football stadium, it showed up again as a smell, which was something everybody experienced, and it moved around. And it's how it showed up as sweet, awful. This is how things show up when we do the CE6 protocol in terms of Bigfoot. But people also had UAPs and portals and all that stuff when did it in Sedona.
So I have heard the music. I know what you're talking about. A lot of what you're talking about, I have experienced on some level in the forest. Now it's making me question. Am I actually moving into Bigfoot territory and not realizing it? But it is interesting that all these things happen. And it's interesting that you're using paranormal equipment for it. REM pods are used for paranormal investigating all the time.
Yeah, for sure.
I know a lot of Bigfoot people, they all go in the wood with sticks and calls and just kind of see what happens. Or trail cams. What you're describing is more like investigating a phenomenon.
Yes. We're not investigating it, we're asking to interact with it. I would make that distinction. And interact with us in any way that's appropriate to our technology and individuals and the group itself. So sometimes there's a group experience, but many times it's an individual experience. The Russian guy, technology guy, he went off by himself and had what's called a non-dual experience, like I had when I did the ARU chant doing the exercise, and he became one with the forest for a long time. So he stayed in that state while we were running around doing this other stuff.
And do you think when you do that kind of investigating, do you think that other phenomenon show up as well?
If the hypothesis is correct, whatever this presence is, it has no limitations in terms of how it can appear and when it can appear. Do you know who Colonel Alexander is?
No.
John Alexander. He was in charge of some of the most important psi-related government projects. Men Who Stare at Ghosts. He was in charge
Oh, yeah.
of
Okay, I've read the book.
Yeah, he was in charge of that.
Okay.
He was the key investigator for Bigelow
Oh, okay.
when he owned Skinwalker Ranch.
Yeah. I know who it is. I just didn't know his name. Okay.
Yeah, so I did an extensive interview with him, and he says that this phenomena is precognitive. It knows what we're going to do. That's how it thwarts all the machinery at Skinwalker Ranch. But it's very friendly to us, and I've been told by different people that it likes what we're doing. I guess it sounds a little personal, that this is the direction it wants to go right now, but it knows what we're going to do. When it said my name, it knew I had to hear that because normally when I'm making movies, I'm like divorced from the paranormal because I what do I need to make a movie is the most important part of it for me in some ways. So yeah, I think it's precog, which makes sense. It seems to know, it does know what's going to happen and set things up. People who see a Bigfoot run across the street when they're or a gravel road or something like that, I don't think it happened by accident. I think it knew the person would be there and gave them the experience they needed to create a little mystery. That's how it works.
It's so interesting that you say that because I always have felt, especially any kind of paranormal experience that I've had, I've been doing this for 30 years. So
I'm
30. A lot of times I feel like when I'm in these moments and I'm having these moments, I feel like this feels a little too personal. This feels like you knew what I was going to do, or you knew who was going to be here in the room, or you knew how I would react to this. And so you're intentionally doing things to pique my curiosity, to force me into some sort of thought pattern. And I always wondered if that was true or if that was just me being a little bit egocentric, because I can be that sometimes. But it is interesting because you were talking about universal consciousness as well. Is it something where the phenomena is utilizing universal consciousness? You know what I mean?
I think it is. That's the mystery again. Yeah. That Mark and I, that's our hypothesis, isn't it, Mark, that it can operate at that level?
Yes.
That was a good short answer, Mark.
It got me to thinking, as Ron may have mentioned, before the show started, I'm the historian of the group. That's what I studied as a history at the University of South Dakota and then master's at the University of Cincinnati. And to me, there's something uniquely happening in the 21st century that could only happen in the 21st century and could not have happened earlier. And that is what the two of you are talking about, and that is this presence seeking people out specifically. And I'm going to tie this together in just a second. Historical figures, mystics, whether you're Muhammad, Moses, Jesus, the Buddha, Baha'i in the 19th century, they're individuals who have incredibly strong charisma and are able to influence large groups. But starting with the middle of the 20th century and working to the present, technology has allowed larger and larger groups to have a collective experience. And by that collective experience, I mean being able to share their individual experiences in a larger collective. Now, people talk about seeing Bigfoot, hearing Bigfoot, seeing the tracks that appear suddenly and disappear suddenly. But these are no longer isolated individuals that don't talk about it because they'll be seen as crackpots. No, these are people that are connected on the World Wide Web. And so you have this very vast collective of people who are sharing, and I'm going to go back to what you talked about earlier, mystical experiences with this presence. So for some reason, we have evolved from a species that had no language but can communicate through music using drums, and then language develops later on. We have stone tools to bronze tools to iron tools to the technology of the 21st century. We just did 50,000 years of history in 20 seconds there for a specific reason, Now, this presence, as Ron and I refer to it using the Jacques Vallée control system hypothesis, this presence has enabled not just a few mystics, but hundreds of thousands, millions of people to have mystical experiences. And we can try to find out a reason for it. And Ron and I have talked about this in coffee houses all around Boulder, but it is existing as it is. It can't be dismissed. There's just too many people that are having these mystical experiences to dismiss it as some sort of collective psychosis. It's not. It's something very real.
Join the crowd, Heather.
I'm wondering, is there a certain type of person that has these experiences, or are they looking for certain markers or certain personality types?
So you know Jacques Vallée?
Yes, I do.
Do you
Yes.
know there's a group of people he's connected with, Gary Nolan, Jeffrey Kripal, Dr. Jeffrey Kripal. These people, they're part of this thing that at least one time was the Invisible College.
Yes.
People, all that stuff.
Yeah, I read a lot.
We sent an early version, a PDF to Dr. Kripal,
Okay.
and he came back and wrote a beautiful blurb for us saying you guys are on the right track, and he knows. So I think that's validation that we're on the right track. The verb is, if you go to the link I sent you for the book,
Yes.
you'll see right away there's his blurb for us. And that's the best vindication that this Jacques Vallée control hypothesis is what the smartest people on the planet are accepting right now. He doesn't do blurbs like that for other people's books. He doesn't know me from Adam, really.
And to your question, Heather, about whether this presence seeks out specific people or not, I think the answer is a sort of yes-no thing. That to Ron's point about the College of Invisibles, there may be specific individuals who are visited by this presence, and then there are people who have near-death experiences that would also be visited by this presence. So I think there are specific individuals. But then there are just everyday people who are in the woods for a walk. They're not like yourself or Ron going into the woods looking for something specific, investigating something. They're just everyday people. And this larger collective is serving a purpose for some reason. So I think it's both yes and no. There are specific individuals, and then there's a sort of perhaps a larger group that are being influenced for some reason.
Right. A lot of times when I talk to these people, just because I talk to people for the podcast all the time, and here's why I asked the question, is there tends to be a story that happens a lot where I was just living my life, doing my thing. I had this experience, and it's usually with Bigfoot, strangely enough, or UFOs. It's one of the two. And all of a sudden, now I have to be in this. Now I have to know what it is. And so now I have this pursuit in the paranormal. Now I'm obsessed with it. Now I have to have other experiences and be in it. I always wonder if the powers that be, this phenomenon, whatever it is, if they know that the person will be highly curious and move through it, if they're gambling on that. So they become part of the phenomenon.
That's a good question. We should find out, huh?
Yeah, you should.
Yeah,
Get back to me.
Gary Nolan has a theory about that there's some sort of signature that relates to people who can get into the flow state, who connects with the flow state. Again, you're setting aside language, that voice that's always chattering to us, or images that are appearing. So he thinks there's some physical correlation. From what I've heard and read from him, that's a possibility.
I'm going to turn things just a little bit more mundane here for a moment. It took 10% of the colonists in 1776 to change the American colonies' view from being part of England to becoming a separate country. That's very few people. That's about 300,000 people of the 3 million that were in the 13 English colonies at the time. What if that's what the presence is looking for? It's looking for a threshold number of people to change the worldview from only accepting the narrow box of how science explains things to breaking that box completely wide open and accepting the paranormal as something that is not only vastly interesting, but will be vastly more important to us as we head into the future. And it only needs 10% of the world to do that, or maybe it needs even less than that in a particular country.
So one of the ways it could do that, Mark, is that it could do it through modifying some of the archetypes in the collective consciousness.
Absolutely.
It shifts everybody at once.
Yep.
We play with that idea in a new science fiction book we have coming out soon.
Called Convergence.
This idea that you don't need that many people to understand for it to change everybody.
Yes.
That's what we're saying.
Yeah. And that's an interesting way of seeing it, because I'm part of a lot of UFO meditation, CE5 situations. And that is what we talk about all the time, is how do we collectively in these groups move the universal consciousness or affect it in some way so that it is out there that these things could be possible. And that's interesting now that we're bringing it into Bigfoot and high strangeness and what you're doing, because it seems to be the same message, just in a different way. But is it the same phenomenon? It could all be the same thing, right?
Maybe
Yes.
we'll find out.
Yeah. Do you see a difference between UFO, UAP stuff and your Bigfoot CE6 stuff? Do you see any separation, or is it converging?
So when we did the protocol in Sedona, not the weekend before, we captured on our thermal amazing UAPs. They appeared briefly. There were 4 of them, and they went zipping across the sky really fast, beyond anything any physics would allow. They were identical, and they were going back and forth, 4 of them, first north then south, then north to south to north. So yeah, they're the best UAPs. It's just like the ones they see at Skinwalker Ranch that they capture on their thermals. So yeah, well, when we did the thing at Sedona, there were 200 people plus doing the chant. And then at one point, they all decided they wanted to stand up, hold hands, and do the accelerated chant, and they did on their own. They just wanted to do it, which was surprising as heck to me that and they all had all these incredible individual experiences, but they had the universal experience of the smell. So it played out at both levels. It scaled. I wanted to know if the phenomena scaled. And I thought when I went there was going to be like 35 people. And then she said, no, it's going to be over 200 people in a football stadium. I said, oh my God. If I had known that, I wouldn't have agreed. By the way, I was replacing Chris Bloodsaw, who bugged out.
Oh my gosh, really?
Yeah.
I'm actually, wow, okay.
So yeah, I'm just putting together and looking at all the footage and figuring out what the heck really happened there, at least in terms of what we were able to record. And seeing these UAPs just blew my mind. Yes, I do connect to UAPs. I changed the title of the talk from the High Strangeness of Bigfoot to the High Strangeness of Bigfoot and UAPs, because we're going to conclude with the UAP.
All right, so there is a correlation. When we first started talking, you mentioned that it can show up any way that it wants.
Yes.
It seems that whatever you need to see is how it shows up.
Or wants you to see.
Or wants you to see, yeah. It does have some sort of sentience, because this is what I'm going to show you today.
That's also what the good colonel said. It was sentient and precog.
Yeah, the precog is, it's one of those things where I don't want to say out loud, because I'm like, what is going on here? It makes sense. So in the future, what are you planning on doing with this information? Are you planning to keep moving with the CE6, or are you going to do more documentaries?
We're going to do one in a couple of weeks.
Do you think that your hypothesis is going to change as you're moving through it?
Mark and I have talked about the way it works for me. I'm just right now. I'm just kind of sifting through, getting data points, and maybe what shows up or not shows up when we do the thing in Eureka Springs. So the ideal scenario is that we're filming and we're doing the chant, and the shadow figure shows up, embraces you, and rises you up into a UAP.
Right. That would be ideal. Yes. I am a flow state person, so
There we go.
I have
And then
expectations.
you come back with guidance for the whole planet because you're the new god.
As we're talking about the future, I like to use the Niels Bohr quote. Prediction is very difficult, especially when you're talking about the future. I like to think that Ron and I will continue to write nonfiction and books as well as novels, as long as both of us are able, and that we'll continue along the lines of this exploration. Maybe it'll go along the lines of what we talked about. How many people does it take to change minds, to go in a new direction? In 100 AD, there were 10,000 Christians in a Roman Empire of 60 million people. 200 years later, there in 300, with Constantine, Rome becomes a Christian nation, Christian empire. So I'm interested in exploring that a little bit, but also Ron, I think we've talked about this a few times. He says it very well. You don't know how the worldview is going to change or what it takes to change the worldview. It's just simply the worldview exists and it is always evolving from 50,000 years ago with flint or stone tools to the 21st century computers and iPads.
I do feel like there's a push from the universe, maybe the universal consciousness, to bring us more into, like you say, the flow state.
Ron certainly uses sensitives all the time now in his investigations at Church Creek and Mount Shasta, and with some remarkable experiences and responses because of it.
As far as the Bigfoot thing goes, when I started, it was all flesh and blood pretty much. But
Yeah.
I think a year ago, Mad Moneymaker actually switched. That was like the turning point. The person who ran the BFRO, the Bigfoot Research Organization.
Yeah.
He decided, I got to go with the flow.
Yeah, there's more and more people that are going the way of maybe it's not flesh and blood, but I was on a Bigfoot panel a year ago and I was surprised. They asked the question, do you think it's flesh and blood or do you think it's something else? And there was a 50-50 divide. A lot of people still think it's flesh and blood, and they are adamant about it too. There's no swaying them. Where can people buy the book? Where can they look at your stuff? All that.
Just Google or go to Amazon and type in the High Strangeness of Bigfoot, and probably in about at least 3 days you'll be able to Google the High Strangeness of Bigfoot movie and find it on YouTube.
Okay, awesome. I will go ahead and put links in my show notes for everything, all of the docs, the book, all of it for you.
All right.
Sounds good.
Thank you so much for this. Has been so intriguing. This has been such a great conversation.
Thank you very much for having us on, Heather.
And thank you for making me think. This has been great. I super appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Thank you for listening to the NVus Alien Podcast. For show notes, go to the website www.nvusalien.com. All of the reference materials and mentions in this episode are linked there. If you want more witchy, paranormal, and fringe content, please subscribe to my Substack. Just search Heather Ashera, that's Heather Ashera, or check the link in the show notes. And as always, see you on the flip side.